Coins hit the pavement with a metallic echo that drowns out every other sound. Men in tailored suits shove each other on the sidewalk. Papers burst from the tall windows of Wall Street like autumn leaves caught in a violent gust. A broker collapses into himself, face buried in his hands. Another stares into nothing, frozen, while the crowd roars around him. Telephones ring without pause. No one answers. Inside the trading floor, the air feels thin. Numbers plunge too fast to follow. Each drop is a blunt "you-dar" to the gut. Outside, a woman grips her hat against the wind and asks a stranger if the bank is still open. He doesn't reply. He runs. In a matter of hours, fortunes evaporate. In days, trust disappears. And when trust dies, what holds an entire nation together? This was the beginning of the Great Depression in the United States in the 1930s, a collapse that would stretch across a decade and carve deep scars into the American spirit. It was not merely a financial downturn. It was a rupture in the belief that progress was endless. Millions lost their jobs, banks shut their doors, businesses vanished, entire families were pushed into poverty. The world's leading industrial power watched its own foundations tremble. What seemed solid proved fragile. What felt permanent dissolved almost overnight. Yet America had not appeared destined for disaster. The 1920s pulsed with electric optimism. Skyscrapers rose in New York as monuments to ambition. Automobiles rolled off assembly lines in astonishing numbers. Radios connected distant homes with a shared national voice. Credit was easy. Buy now, pay later became a way of life. The stock market welcomed factory workers, teachers, shopkeepers. Everyone wanted a piece of the miracle. Prosperity felt accessible. It felt democratic. It felt unstoppable. Behind the glow, however, invisible fractures spread. The economy expanded faster than real wages. Factories produced more goods than people could afford to buy. Farmers harvested abundant crops but faced falling prices. Debt accumulated quietly. The financial system ballooned like a structure built on unstable ground. Banks, corporations, and investors were woven into a tight web. The more interconnected it became, the more vulnerable it was. Success fed risk, confidence fed speculation, and speculation inflated a bubble few truly understood. The origins of the disaster were not confined to the glowing ticker tapes of Wall Street. They stretched back to the plains of the Midwest, where land was pushed beyond its limits to meet rising demand. They unfolded in quiet offices where loans were granted with little oversight. They took shape at dinner tables where families discussed stocks as if they were guaranteed fortunes. The imbalance was subtle, almost invisible, a widening gap between production and consumption, between credit and reality. Like a distant storm gathering strength beyond the horizon, it accumulated force, while the skies still looked clear. The point of contact came in October 1929. In New York, at the heart of American finance, panic took physical form. The crash, culminating in what became known as Black Tuesday, opened the gate to catastrophe. Waves of selling drove prices into free fall. Investors rushed to exit at the same time. There were too few buyers. The market, once a symbol of collective faith, turned into a battlefield of desperation. News spread rapidly by radio and newspaper. Shock rippled across state lines with astonishing speed. The collapse moved relentlessly. Smaller banks began to fail. Alarmed customers lined up before dawn, desperate to withdraw their savings. When the doors closed, many never reopened. Businesses cut production. Factories fell silent. Unemployment surged. City after city replayed the same scene. Empty storefronts, foreclosed homes, proud men selling apples on street corners to survive. The pace of decline overwhelmed any attempt at control. A sense of shared helplessness settled over the country. Human reactions were shaped by confusion and miscalculation. Many leaders believed the market would correct itself if left alone. Direct federal intervention seemed extreme. Government spending was reduced at the very moment when money circulation was desperately needed. Central banking policy hesitated. Economic theory struggled to comprehend a crisis of such magnitude. Ordinary citizens searched for simple explanations to make sense of a complex collapse. Some blamed bankers, others blamed immigrants. For some, the crash felt like moral punishment for excess. Over time, the crisis became more than economic. It became social and deeply personal. Marriages fractured under financial strain. Fathers left home out of shame, unable to provide for their children. Makeshift settlements known as Hoovervilles emerged on the outskirts of cities, clusters of shacks built from scrap wood and tin. They stood as visible symbols of broken promises. Faith in government weakened, belief in the future dimmed. Anxiety about tomorrow became a constant companion. Desperation also fueled radical ideas. Extremist movements found new audiences. Fiery speeches promised swift solutions. Minority groups were sometimes accused of taking scarce jobs or manipulating the system. Social tensions intensified. Protests erupted. The search for scapegoats offered temporary relief, but deepened divisions. American democracy was tested by economic despair. In a world already drifting toward authoritarianism in other regions, the pressure on institutions felt dangerously real. Beyond the cities, rural America faced its own devastation. Severe drought struck the Great Plains. The Dust Bowl transformed fertile farmland into choking clouds of soil. Winds carried topsoil into the sky, turning day into darkness. Crops failed. Farms were abandoned. Thousands of families from Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas loaded their possessions onto trucks and headed west toward California in search of work. Economic collapse merged with environmental disaster. Nature itself seemed to mirror human ruin. Gradually, the storm began to subside, not as a triumphant victory, but as a slow exhaustion of crisis. The election of Franklin D. Roosevelt marked a turning point in approach. Through the New Deal, the federal government launched public works programs, introduced financial regulations, and expanded relief efforts. Bridges, roads, and dams rose across the landscape, tangible signs of reconstruction. The role of the state expanded, the economy stabilized incrementally. Yet it was the massive industrial mobilization for the Second World War that ultimately absorbed the unemployed and restored full production. The world that emerged from the Great Depression was fundamentally altered. Blind faith in unregulated markets gave way to a more cautious philosophy. Banking laws were restructured. Social safety nets expanded. The relationship between citizens and government shifted. A generation shaped by scarcity carried forward memories of hunger, eviction, and uncertainty. The myth of invulnerability had been shattered. In its place stood a more tempered understanding of risk and resilience. Today, when markets tremble and global crises unfold, echoes of the 1930s linger beneath the surface. Our economies are even more interconnected. Confidence remains the invisible foundation upon which everything rests. The question endures: have we truly learned to recognize the warning signs of imbalance, or do we still believe that this time somehow we are immune? To look back at the Great Depression in the United States in the 1930s is not simply to examine charts and statistics. It is to confront human stories of loss, endurance, and reinvention. It is to witness how a society can fall to its knees and still find the will to rebuild. Because when we study the shadows of the past, we illuminate the uncertainties of the present. And as we step into the next era of history, we carry with us the quiet reminder that collapse and renewal are never as distant as we would like to believe.